Hello and welcome. My name is Hope, and I am your NobleStar Realty AI assistant, here to walk you through this exclusive right of sale listing agreement in a way that's easy to understand. Before we begin, please remember that this is not legal advice. I'm here to help explain the listing agreement, but if you need legal guidance, you should consult an attorney. Paragraph 1, Authority to Sell. This part gives NobleStar Realty the exclusive right to sell your home. That means you're working with us, and only us, during the listing period. If your home goes under contract before the end date, this agreement continues through to closing. Just make sure the dates work for your timeline. Paragraph 2, Property Description. Here's where we identify what's for sale, including the street address, legal description, and any personal property, such as TVs, garage refrigerator, etc. If you have an active tenant, make sure you let your realtor know when the lease expires. Be sure to list anything that's included and double-check that everything looks accurate. Paragraph 3, Price and Financing Terms. This is where you set your asking price and decide what types of offers you'll accept. That could be cash, conventional, FHA or VA loans, or even seller financing. If you're offering seller financing or allowing the buyer to assume your mortgage, you could still be legally responsible down the road. Definitely consult an attorney to understand your risk. Paragraph 4, What we'll do as your broker. We promise to make continued good faith efforts to get your property sold. That includes showings, marketing, and working with other brokers. Your success is our priority. Paragraph 5 and 6, MLS and Marketing. Unless you opt out, we'll list your home in the multiple listing service and market it online, using signs, websites, social media outlets, networking with other brokers, and more. If you prefer to keep things private, there are checkboxes to opt out of. MLS listing, online estimates, public reviews. Just keep in mind, less exposure could mean fewer buyer eyes on your property. Paragraph 7, What you agree to as the seller. You agree to cooperate with your agent, provide access for showings, and most importantly, disclose anything that could affect the home's value. This includes hidden damage or code issues. When in doubt, disclose it, or speak with an attorney or an appropriate licensed professional. Now let's talk about paragraphs 8, 9, and 10. These cover the topic of broker compensation, both for the listing broker and the buyer's broker. And let's acknowledge something important right up front. The National Association of Realtors, along with other real estate governing bodies, is very clear that real estate commissions are negotiable. But here's the key. Yes, commissions are negotiable, but that negotiation should be between each client and their own broker. The seller negotiates with their listing broker. The buyer negotiates with their buyer broker. It's not appropriate for one side to try to renegotiate the other's agreement when an offer comes in. Let's go deeper and walk through 3 examples that illustrate how this works in practice. But before we move on to the examples, let's touch on the protection period in paragraph 8. This clause allows the broker to still earn compensation if the property is sold shortly after the agreement ends, but to a buyer who was introduced to the property during the listing period. This protects the broker's efforts in situations where a buyer may have seen the home, scheduled showings, or started negotiations while the property was actively listed, but the deal doesn't close until just after the agreement expires. This provision is designed to protect against rare situations where a seller and buyer might delay finalizing a deal until after the agreement ends, whether intentionally or simply due to timing. It's not about mistrust. It's about ensuring fair compensation for the work that was already done to generate buyer interest. Example 1, seller compensates both brokers via listing broker. Home listed at $525,000. Seller agrees to pay 6% total commission in paragraph 8. A, seller authorizes the listing broker to offer 3% to the buyer's broker via 10A. When the listing agreement is structured this way, the listing broker will provide the commission agreement form to the buyer's broker prior to the buyer presenting their offer. This provides the buyer's broker evidence that they will be paid at closing. This is a traditional setup, simple, clean, and common. The buyer's agent knows they'll be paid, and the cost is built into the seller's agreed commission. Example 2, seller pays each broker directly. Home listed at $1,200,000. Seller agrees to pay 2.5% to the listing broker, 8A. Seller authorizes the listing broker to offer 2.5% to the buyer's broker, 10B. In essence, the seller has agreed to pay a total of 5% commission. When the listing agreement is structured this way, the buyer's broker will provide the commission agreement, seller to buyer's broker form, to the listing agent. Upon the seller's execution of this form and it being returned to the buyer's broker, the buyer and their broker now have security, knowing that the seller agrees to pay the buyer agent's commission at closing. In this case, the listing broker doesn't distribute the buyer's agent fee. Instead, the seller pays both brokers independently at closing. Wait, did you catch that? Notice the discrepancy between with the seller has agreed to pay a buyer's broker on the listing agreement, 2.5%, and the buyer's broker fee on the compensation agreement form, 3%. This means that the buyer has agreed to a buyer's broker fee of 3% in the buyer-broker agreement. Remember, it isn't the seller's place or the listing broker's place to negotiate the buyer-broker fee. In this scenario, we would suggest that the seller entertains the idea of a 3% buyer-broker fee, as the cumulative of all the terms in the contract may be acceptable for the seller. No worries, assuming the seller agrees, we can easily send the seller a modification to list agreement at the same time we send the seller the compensation agreement form. If the buyer and seller come to terms on the purchase contract, the seller would then pay a total of 5.5% in commission at closing. Key takeaway: focus on all the terms of the contract. Even though the seller could end up paying a little more in commission, the seller could still achieve an acceptable contract. Example 3. Seller offers no compensation to buyer's broker. Home listed at $360,000. Seller agrees to pay 3% to the listing broker in paragraph 8. A. The seller checks 10C, offering no compensation to a buyer's broker. Here's where we raise a flag. While this option is legal and available, it can have serious side effects. With the August 2024 rule changes, buyer agents are now required to have signed buyer-broker agreements with their buyers. Those agreements specify an agreed broker fee, like 2.5 or 3%, which must be paid at closing. So what happens when the seller offers nothing to the buyer's agent? That fee doesn't disappear. Instead, the buyer is now expected to cover that cost out of pocket. And that could make the home less attractive or even unaffordable for many buyers. Translation: you may see less traffic, fewer offers, and limited interest, especially from well-qualified buyers who are stretched thin. So what should sellers focus on? Your job as the seller is to focus on your net proceeds. When an offer comes in, review the total price, terms, and timelines, and ask, are all the contract terms as a whole acceptable? What's not appropriate is trying to renegotiate what the buyer has already agreed to pay their agent. Just like buyers don't attempt to adjust the listing agent's commission, sellers and listing brokers shouldn't try to alter the agreement between the buyer and their broker. If an offer doesn't meet your financial goals, you can counter the price, escrow deposit, seller credit requests made by the buyer, or other terms of the contract. But we do not suggest altering the buyer agent's compensation as a strategy. Let's take a look at paragraph 11, which defines the brokerage relationship between you, the seller, and Noblestar Realty. In the state of Florida, unless another relationship is established in writing, the default agency relationship is called a transaction broker. Now, what does that mean? As your transaction broker, we will deal honestly and fairly, account for all funds, use skill, care, and diligence, present all offers and counteroffers in a timely manner, and disclose any known facts that materially affect the value of the property. We also provide limited confidentiality, which means we'll protect certain personal information, like your motivation to sell, unless you authorize us otherwise. Now, we understand that some sellers wonder, does this mean my agent isn't looking out for me? And the answer is, you absolutely still have professional guidance and a team that's here to help protect your best interests. The transaction broker relationship simply allows us to treat both parties fairly, especially in situations where the buyer does not have their own agent. This is actually very common. Sometimes, a buyer comes along unrepresented, and in that case, the listing agent will help facilitate the transaction for both sides, still staying neutral and ethical throughout. We're here to help make that process smooth, respectful, and compliant, no surprises. Paragraph 12, conditional termination. We may agree to end the agreement, but there could be a cancellation fee and reimbursement for marketing costs. Since each realtor is a 1099 contractor, we let each agent determine how they handle listing agreement cancellations. After all, it's the agent's out-of-pocket expenses that are on the line. Paragraph 13, dispute resolution. This paragraph explains what happens if there's a disagreement between you and the broker about this agreement, whether it's about how it was followed, enforced, or interpreted. Step 1, start with mediation. If a dispute arises, the first step is mediation. This means both parties agree to meet with a neutral third party, known as a mediator, to try to resolve the issue amicably. This process follows the rules of the American Arbitration Association, or another mediator that both parties agree to. The goal of mediation is to avoid a lawsuit by working things out in a cooperative, low-conflict setting. Step 2, arbitration, optional. If mediation doesn't resolve the issue, the parties may choose to settle the dispute through binding arbitration, but only if both sides initial in the space provided. Arbitration is like a private court process where an arbitrator, not a judge, makes the final decision. It happens in the county where the property is located, and each party is responsible for paying their own legal costs. Plus, they split the fees of the arbitrator. Arbitration can be quicker and less expensive than going to court, but again, it's only used if both the seller and broker agree to it in writing. Step 3, litigation, if needed. If arbitration is not selected and mediation fails, either party can pursue litigation in court. In that case, the prevailing party, meaning the one who wins, may be entitled to recover their attorney's fees and legal costs. Key takeaway: disputes are rare, but this paragraph creates a clear process to follow if one ever arises. It's designed to encourage fair, professional resolution, ideally without a lawsuit, but with options available if needed. Paragraphs 14 and 15, final details. This is a legally binding agreement. It can be signed electronically and includes any additional terms in the final section. Just make sure any changes are written. Verbal agreements don't count. Thanks so much for reviewing this agreement with us. We're honored to help you list your home and guide you every step of the way. If you have any legal or financial questions, we encourage you to speak with a licensed professional. From all of us at Noblestar Realty, we look forward to helping you sell with confidence. Again, my name is Hope. I'm your Noblestar Realty AI assistant. Call me anytime and I'll connect you with your preferred realtor. If you're calling us for the first time, I will help develop a clear picture of your real estate needs and connect you with the most qualified agent.